Chapter 30. With a little help from her friends. It was impossible to imagine that Evil Queen's castle could appear scarier and more foreboding than it already was, but somehow it had managed to pull off this feat. It loomed above the crag, its dark tower rising to the skies. Evie remembered her lonely childhood spent inside its confines, her only company a mother obsessed with outward appearances. Evie knew every cosmetic trick, every fashion tip, but had been bereft of true support and affection. But this was no time for bad memories or a pity party. Mal was lost under the ocean, trapped by some evil force, and they had to help her. The VKs made their way toward the castle, fighting through a row of hedges and vines that surrounded its walls. "Ouch," said Jay, as he pulled a particularly large barb from his flag. "Sorry," said Evie. "Mom prefers thorns and cuts off the roses." "Of course," said Carlos. "Why are we here again? If there's wicked magic on the Isle, then we need to fight it with similarly strong magic. And there's no magic stronger than my mom's magic mirror." "Isn't it broken?" asked Carlos. "The glass is broken, and I have a tiny shard of it in my combat. But the frame still stands, and something tells me the glass was mostly for display. It's made of magic, and if there's magic on the Isle, it'll work." They reached the drawbridge, passed over the moat, and stood in front of the main door. Evie felt in her pockets for the key and realized she left it back in her room on Oridon. She hadn't planned on visiting home. "Guys, I have bad news," she told them. "I didn't bring the key." "What now?" asked Carlos. "Break in?" "Can't be that hard," said Jay with a shrug. Evie shook her head. "Mom has massive security on this thing. Remember, this isn't Oridon. If we pick the lock and open the door without the right key, a steel trap will spring, and we'll all fall into a basement full of hungry alligators. It was the Evil Queen's castle, after all." "Okay, so let's not do that," Carlos said with a shudder. "Mom keeps a spare key in the vulture's nest over there," Evie said, motioning to a ledge high in the air where they could just make out a shadow of a large bird's nest. "Easy enough to climb," said Jay, starting to find a foothold in the castle walls. "No!" screamed Evie, and Jay slid back to the ground. "Sorry," she said. "The vultures will peck you to death. We'll just have to convince them I'm my mom." Jay picked himself up and dusted off. "How are we going to do that?" Evie smiled. "Makeup." Evie knelt at the doorway, set down her purse, and began to remove assorted cosmetics from its depths. A dizzying array of lipstick, foundation, blush, eyeliner, and every conceivable beauty instrument known to humanity. She turned her back to the boys and began the transformation. The eyebrows were easy since she and her mother had the same dark brows. Evie just had to color them in so they looked more menacing. Then she covered her face in a pale powder and darkened her lips to blood red. As a final touch, she fashioned a black scarf she found in her bag into a black cape. When she turned to Jay and Carlos, the two of them staggered back. "Whoa," said Carlos. "You are way too good at that." "Who are you and what did you do with Evie?" said Jay. Evie cackled like her mother and held out an apple she'd packed as a snack. "One bite and all your dreams will come true," she purred in her best Evil Queen voice. "Seriously, stop it," yelled Carlos. Evie giggled and sounded like her normal self. "Okay, fine." She fluffed up her cape and checked her appearance in her phone's camera. "I look like Mom, right? Enough to fool those old vultures?" "Totally," said Jay. "Could have fooled us," said Carlos. She began to climb up the castle walls toward the vulture's nest, lifting herself up inch by inch. When she reached the ledge, she smiled sweetly at the hungry birds of prey, her mother's favorite pets. "Hello, my dearies," she said to her best mimicry of her mother's voice. "I seem to have forgotten my keys. Now let me just—" She reached into the nest. The closest vulture lunged, snapping at her fingers. Evie frowned. It looked like she would have to channel more of her mother after all. She couldn't just put on the makeup and expect the vultures to let her have the key. She had to be Evil Queen. The vultures began to shriek and claw at her. "Silence!" she demanded. "You know the penalty if you fail to give me the key." She glared at them as her mother would. She looked so frightening and so much like her mother at that moment that the vultures squawked and flapped their wings, flying away from her as fast as they could. "Sorry, birdies," Evie whispered as she reached back into the nest and grabbed the key to the front door. She slid down, Jay and Carlos giving her a hand as she made it back to the front steps. In a blink, they were finally inside. It was the same as it ever was, dark and shadowy and full of cobwebs. They tiptoed past the kitchen. "This place gives me the creeps," said Carlos. Jay nodded silently. "Oh, it's not that bad," said Evie. "It's worse when Mom's around." They made their way through the dark corridors up to the bedrooms, where Evil Queen kept her legendary magic mirror. Evie opened the door, half expecting her mother to scold her for letting in a draft, but it was as empty as expected. Mom never missed a night out with her hags. The mirror shards clung to the edges of the frame, but when Evie stepped up to it, it was almost as if it were whole again. "Magic," whispered Evie. "I can feel it coming from below, from deep underground somehow. It's weak, but it's working." She gazed into the largest fragment. She noticed she was still wearing her Evil Queen disguise, which might turn out in her favor. "Magic mirror from the farthest space, through wind and darkness I summon thee," she called. For a moment the mirror remained foggy and dark, but slowly it began to shift and reveal something else, a face in the mirror, the face of the mirror. "What wouldst you know, my queen?" asked the mirror in a deep, sonorous voice that echoed throughout the castle. It worked! Evie tried to keep her composure. "Magic mirror on the wall," she said, addressing the mirror by its full true name. "Show me the dark fairy named Mal." The clouds swirled once more. Then they parted to reveal deep blue depths, a sunken pirate ship, a great school of fish swimming in a circle. "Where is she?" said Evie, searching every image in the mirror. "Show me Mal," she commanded. Carlos gasped. "Look!" Through the bubbles and the murk, they saw their friend walking dazedly on the deck of the ship. Mal was walking toward a door, as if compelled toward it. She had a glassy look in her eyes as she reached for the handle. "Mal, stop! Don't open that door!" yelled Evie.